Hey, what's going on? Right before I started, man, I had a sneezing fit. Might be getting a little loud in the hallway. Classes are changing. But man, if you are suffering from allergies, I wonder if today is as bad for you as it is me. It's ridiculous. I got to take like 3 medications. Nothing is keeping the allergies at bay today. For social studies class, what I would like to do is head back to Chernobyl. There's a new video out about Chernobyl, but there's some things that I want to talk about that maybe, just kind of growing up in the time that you've grown up, you just aren't aware of some of the things that were going on in Chernobyl in 1986 when this explosion happened. Not really an explosion, not like things blowing up. But, well, the first thing we can talk about is radiation. So Chernobyl was a nuclear power plant. We've talked about this before. I know we have. And Maine had a nuclear power plant. It was near Bath, Maine Yankee. So anytime that you're near a power plant, you're getting relatively inexpensive energy. Relatively clean for the environment. I'll get to why it comes with a cost in a minute. So those two things were very attractive to a lot of countries at the time. It's like, it's cheap, fairly safe, and not so bad for the environment. It's certainly better at the time. I mean, Lewiston and Auburn in the 80s when I was growing up, like the Androscoggin River was just polluted from just factories and the nasty stuff, that the pollution that was coming out of the smokestacks. So compared to that at the time, nuclear power plants were popping up all over the place. That's kind of slowed down in at least the United States. Some other countries like Germany right now, nuclear power plants are on the rise. I'm not sure if you remember a few years ago when there was a tsunami in Fukushima. It's a Japanese power plant. There was a tsunami, damage done, radiation being leaked. So the problem with radiation, let's get into that next, is that you can't see it. You'll see Nick. He's got a little yellow thing called like a Geiger counter, and he is going to talk about radiation exposure. And he's going to talk about what he's experiencing in Chernobyl today versus some other places where you might get radiation exposure. Like when you have x-rays done, you are exposed to radiation. And that's why the technicians who work with x-rays every day, you'll see them going behind barriers, parts of your body that aren't being x-rayed. They might have like a lead kind of covering that you'll put over other parts of your body because it can be damaging, and long-term exposure can really be damaging. It can lead to cancer developing. It can lead to birth defects if the child is unborn but exposed. But if the mother is exposed to radiation, Chernobyl, the soil is just full of radiation. So the crops being grown. And what happens is, just a whole bunch of bad stuff can happen because the radiation can affect your cells. And when they are reproducing, these mutations may happen. So not good for anybody. Another thing I want to get into about Chernobyl at the time, because Chernobyl stopped being a city, or Pripyat, the city that Chernobyl is the plant, Pripyat is the city in Ukraine, and that little red dot right there, that actually shows you where Chernobyl is located. So we have these countries here. Ukraine, it's actually in Ukraine, but it's very close to the border of Belarus. And then you have these 3 countries here. Basically, let's go like this: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia. These, in 1986, these countries were all part of the Soviet Union. So there was no border between Ukraine, Belarus. And the radiation really didn't care about a border either, because when that explosion happened, a lot of radiation was picked up in this area because it had drifted. So the exposure happened here, but a lot of the exposure of the radiation was picked up in like Sweden, and that's how the world knew like what the heck is going on, because the Soviet Union at the time, it wasn't Russia at the time. Russia was part of the Soviet Union, this much larger country. Azerbaijan, Armenia is down in here, Turkmenistan. This was all not Afghanistan, but this was all, boom, part of one country, the Soviet Union. And they were very secretive about it. So let's talk about the Soviet Union itself. We'll get rid of the map there. Lenin. I got some notes over here. Nick is going to show a couple pictures of Lenin. And for the Soviet Union, it's basically like their George Washington. The first premier of the Soviet Union, the first leader, was Lenin. So you will see some pictures of Lenin that he will show you. At the time, I can speak on this from experience, in 1986, Cold War. We know now in 2021, Soviet Union, the US, they will never go to war against each other. We've talked about Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan. They would fight these, they call them proxy wars. So they're not actually fighting each other, but they are on the sides of like two forces that might be fighting. Let's take Vietnam. North Vietnam, the Soviets were helping them out. South Vietnam, the Americans were helping them out. So weren't directly fighting against each other, but resources and American soldiers were being killed in Vietnam and Afghanistan. Soviet soldiers were being killed, because of the Americans not directly fighting against each other. Korea, same thing, North, South Korea. So in 1986 and before, I remember every Saturday in Lewiston, where I grew up, the first Saturday of every month, I should say, at noon, there was an air raid siren. Like the whole town, like there were different air raid places, and you could hear this siren going off. And what it was doing is testing in case the Soviets came and decided to drop a bomb on us. So the Soviet Union was very much in the back of a lot of Americans' minds, just because we didn't know, like, could we go to war? There were bomb shelters. You would see a little picture. I doubt I can pull it up so quickly. But all around town, there were, like Holy Family Church in Lewiston, there was, in the basement, there was a little sign that said bomb shelter. Now people can vintage bomb shelter sign. Let's see if that will pick it. Yeah, they look like this. I think I can share it. Yeah, so they look like that. They had that little sign on there, and so if there was ever an attack, you could go into a bomb shelter. Usually the basement of like churches, schools, things like that. Another thing that like your grandparents had to worry about, my parents, were bomb drills. So, we have fire drills in school now. We have maybe your kids will be thinking like, oh my gosh, how did you have this? But lockdowns, those are kind of going away, but have those lockdown drills. Well, my parents, your grandparents, probably, if you ask them, would have bomb drills. So, the fire alarm would go off or whatever. This is a drill for a bomb. They would be taught to go under their desk and prepare for a bomb coming. So that's what was going on in 86. Both countries feared each other. And you'll see that as Nick was walking around. He's going to show you gas masks, even like a little kid gas mask, because the Soviets were worried that the Americans would bomb them without warning. So thankfully, that didn't happen, but I wanted to give you a little background on Ukraine, Chernobyl, Cold War, what was going on in the world at the time, because we're so removed from it, and that's probably a good thing. Now, this is way off topic. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but you all are dealing with something very different. We were worried about, oh, the Soviets growing up. That was always in the back of my mind. I almost think you have something a little bit worse you have to deal with, and that is social media. I think years from now, I mean, people are already understanding, but social media really messes with your head. And I'm sure, you look on there, oh, how many likes did I get on this that I put up there? And it can be really damaging. So I think, and you may probably know it more than I do, but if you're constantly looking at social media and constantly wanting likes and stuff, that's pretty damaging, I think, to any brain, but to a brain that's 13, 12 or 13, 14, that's still developing. I mean, I think that's going to be the thing. We're going to look back on like, wow, because you all are pretty much the first generation to experience this type of bombardment from social media at such a young age. And it does worry me quite a bit. So in some ways, you have less to worry about when it comes to world affairs, in a way. Like, we're at a pretty good place, a pretty peaceful place, but there are other things that are quite damaging that we will find out the effects of probably when you are in your 20s. So, all right, enough.